Greetings. My name is Malik Israel, and welcome to the Audacity of Truth Podcast. In case you didn't know, it takes a great deal of audacity to discern between the truth and falsehood and express the same to you. If you will allow me, I will show you the difference between every deception and every truth that I know of.
Welcome to the Audacity of Truth Podcast with our host Malik Israel. Please help out our podcast by following and sharing.
This is the introduction to the Audacity of Truth Podcast entitled The Last Trump, Part 2.
Much with your staff. He's the first foreign head of state to visit during our administration, and Bibi, I want to say it's an honor to
Babylon, the shadow government of old, never truly vanished. It simply evolved. Its fingerprints on every corner of the world, from hidden agendas to manipulated events like October 7th. But what if I told you this was prophesied long ago? What if the Synagogue of Satan has been shaping a fascist agenda for world dominance, and the fall of New Babylon is not just inevitable, it's already in motion? Join me, Malik Israel, on this week's episode of the Audacity of Truth Podcast as I expose the Babylonian Shadow Government, unveil the chilling truths behind October 7th, and connect the dots between ancient prophecy and the world we live in today. The downfall is near, but what side will you be on when it all comes crashing down? Tune in now. It's time to see the world for what it truly is.
Resources and support disappeared for them. I recognize
so let us take a look
Israel's
at how the world really is today.
And got it
Watch
built,
this.
by the way.
Mr. President, today
Call.
I would ask that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, today we find ourselves in a pivotal moment in American history. And millions of Americans, by their actions or lack of action, will determine the future of our country for decades. In my view, the Trump administration is moving this country very aggressively into an oligarchic form of society where extraordinary power rests in the hands of a small number of unelected multi-billionaires. The Trump administration is moving this country very aggressively into an authoritarian society where the rule of law and our Constitution are being ignored and undermined in order to give more power to the White House and the billionaires who now control our government. The Trump administration is moving this country very rapidly toward a kleptocracy, where the function of government is not to serve the needs of ordinary people, but to enrich those who are in power. Mr. President, I think that today is a very good day to recall what one of our great presidents said at Gettysburg in November of 1863. Looking out at a battlefield where thousands of Union soldiers had just sacrificed their lives in the defense of freedom and the ending of slavery, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Mr. President, I fear very much that under President Trump, we are not seeing a government of the people, by the people, for the people, but rather a government of the billionaire class, by the billionaire class and for the billionaire class. And what is really interesting is that none of this is happening behind closed doors. It's not being done in secret. It's right out there for everybody to see. Several weeks ago, Donald Trump was inaugurated for a second term as president. Standing right behind him were the three richest men in America, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Mark Zuckerberg. Combined, these three men are worth $920 billion. These three men own more wealth than the bottom half of American society, 170 million people. Three guys, 170 million people. And I should point out, and this should tell you exactly where we are going as a nation, these three men, wealthiest three in America, have become some $232 billion richer since Trump was elected a few weeks ago. Three guys, $232 billion richer since Trump was elected. Mr. President, this is how an oligarchic system works. Elon Musk, the wealthiest person in the world and now a key part of the Trump administration, spent over $277 million to get Trump elected. In other words, within a corrupt campaign finance system, which allows billionaires to spend as much as they want, he helped buy the election for Mr. Trump. Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg, the second and third wealthiest people in our country, both kicked $1 million each into Trump's inauguration fund. And let us remember that Mr. Bezos, who among other things owns the Washington Post, rescinded the endorsement of that paper for Kamala Harris just before the election. Mr. Bezos was showing early on that he was willing to bend the knee for Donald Trump. Mark Zuckerberg, the founder and CEO of Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, agreed to settle a lawsuit with Trump for $25 million. These three multi-billionaires are working with Trump for one very simple reason. They understand that Trump's policies are designed to make the very wealthiest people in this country even richer. Since Trump's election, Mr. Musk has become $154 billion richer. Not bad in a couple of weeks' time. He earned a great investment. He only spent a couple of $100 million on the election, and now he's $154 billion richer. Mr. Bezos has become $35 billion richer, and Mr. Zuckerberg has become $43 billion richer. Mr. President, I am concerned not only about the growing movement toward oligarchy in this country, but I am deeply worried that under the leadership of President Trump, we are moving rapidly towards authoritarianism. And all over this country, people are alarmed and shocked by what they have seen in the last several weeks. Just a few examples, just a few. Last week, President Trump attempted to suspend all federal grants and loans in direct violation of the U.S. Constitution and federal law. As every third grader in America knows, or I hope knows, the power of the purse in the United States belongs to Congress, not the president. Yes, the president can recommend legislation to Congress. The president can veto legislation that Congress has passed. But he does not have the power to unilaterally terminate funding and legislation that has been passed by the U.S. Congress. That is a dangerous and blatantly unconstitutional act. And I should add that Trump's blocking of federal funding would have had a horrific impact on millions of Americans who utilize programs like Medicaid, Head Start, community health centers, Meals on Wheels, homeless veterans programs, and many, many other initiatives. Tens of millions of Americans, including some of the most vulnerable in our country, were impacted by that decision. But that's not all. A few days ago, Trump fired 17 inspectors general, independent government watchdogs that were created by Congress in the wake of the Watergate scandal to prevent the abuse of power by the executive branch. Last week, President Trump fired a member of the National Labor Relations Board, and in so doing, effectively neutered the only federal agency in America with the authority to hold corporations accountable for illegal union busting and to protect the constitutional right of millions of workers who want to join unions in order to earn better wages, working conditions, and benefits. Not only is that move blatantly illegal, it is exactly what Elon Musk, the owner of Tesla, and Jeff Bezos, the owner of Amazon, have been fighting for months. They don't like unions. And what Mr. Trump has given them is the opportunity to make it much, much harder for workers to organize in their companies. President Trump also illegally fired members of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the only independent commission in our country that protects workers against discrimination in the workforce. Further, and what should upset every American, no matter whether you're conservative, moderate, progressive, is that in direct violation of the Constitution and federal law, Trump is intimidating the media with lawsuits against ABC, CBS, Meta, and the Des Moines Register. His FCC is now threatening to investigate PBS and NPR. What Trump is essentially saying to every media outlet in America, if you say or do anything that is critical of me, that displeases me, you may be subject to a lawsuit or a federal investigation. If that is not a direct attack on the First Amendment, on the U.S. Constitution and free speech in our country, I don't know what is. But that is not all. Elon Musk and his unelected minions at Doge have forced out officials at the Treasury Department and illegally shut down USAID, a program which, among other things, helps feed and provide medical help to starving and desperate children all over the world. Presidents, much less unelected billionaires, do not have the unilateral right to shut down federal agencies established by Congress. And when we talk about the very dangerous movement towards authoritarianism that we are seeing in this country now, even worse, not only did he pardon those people, but Trump is undermining the FBI by actually investigating the agents there who help bring these violent criminals to justice. Imagine that. Pardoning the people who broke the law and investigating the people who upheld the law. That is not what America is supposed to be about. Mr. President, under Trump, we are rapidly moving toward a kleptocracy as well. Just before the president was inaugurated, he and his wife launched their own cryptocurrency coins, giving them the potential to earn many billions of dollars. If Wall Street CEOs tried to bribe the president with a bag full of money, that would be illegal. That's against the law. But now they don't have to do that. Today, if a multi-billionaire, the head of a foreign country, wants to curry favor with the president, All they have to do is buy his cryptocurrency coins, and when they do that, they are directly enriching Mr. Trump. So, Mr. President, the question that millions of Americans are asking is, given the move toward oligarchy, given the move toward authoritarianism, given the movement toward kleptocracy, where do we go from here?
Out of all the things that Bernie Sanders said about Donald Trump, he did not call Donald Trump a fascist because he didn't want to bring attention to that word, because he knows that they're all fascists. You know, they talk about the corporations running the United States. It's been that way. It hasn't just started. It's just that Donald Trump is so out in the open with his that he don't care what you think. See, that's the same way with being spiritual. When you're spiritual, you have to be independent of somebody else's good opinion of you. Because me, for example, I can't be caring about somebody else's opinion of me because I tell you the truth. Most liars are not going to want you to, or they're going to be in denial about the truth. They won't even be able to see it. The truth will be staring them right in the face, and they won't even be able to face it. But anyway, check this out.
No matter whether it's Trump or anyone else. Anyone who says, for example, well, that's what you get for voting for Trump, or you should have voted for Harris. Well, I mean, you're so thoroughly indoctrinated and participating in the deception and the deflection of that system that you yourself are just as much a cause for the collapse of the United States as anyone else that you blame for it. You created a class of national elites, oligarchical elites, whose private profit interests are no longer connected to your own economy. You did that. They're not connected to any productive activity. They're not connected to any nationality. They're not connected to your standard of living, not to your stability, not to your safety, your prosperity, your success as a nation or anything. And that class of private sector powers became essentially a nation unto themselves, like I've said many times. A nation that transcends borders, transcends national interests. They don't have any interests except their own interests. You created that, and you celebrated that, in fact. You still celebrate it, never realizing that they would inevitably sacrifice you for their own profit interests, the same way that they've sacrificed millions of people outside your country. You created this psychopathic class of predators. And you expected them to never bite the hand that feeds them, even though the hand that feeds them has always been feeding them hands.
Unfortunately, the weakness and incompetence of those years, those past 4 years, the grave damage around the globe that was done, including in the Middle East, grave damage all over the globe. The horrors of October 7th would never have happened if I were president.
The United States referred to Hamas as being a terrorist group, but Hamas is not all over the landscape in every country, terrorizing the people, taking over the country, like the United States is talking about taking over Gaza and controlling it and changing everything and building high-rise condominiums, making it a waterfront resort and all this type of stuff, when I knew from the beginning that that's what Israel was about, because I saw how they was actually demolishing the country rather than trying to get rid of Hamas. If you watch those clips, I had pointed it out in a posting that I did on Instagram, talking about how those explosions were at the base of those buildings more so than a missile or bomb entering the building from the top. So I saw that they was trying to demolish Gaza from the beginning. From the beginning, they wanted the people out of there. And I can't help but think that it was a false flag operation, the whole thing about October the 7th. Then another thing, why October the 7th? I know that not only is October the 7th my Earth Day, but it's also Vladimir Putin's Earth Day. It's also Elijah Muhammad's Earth Day. So maybe it has some type of connection to these well-known figures, especially since Russia is supposed to be the opposition to the United States. When, of course, as I've said many times before, I believe that Israel is one of the United States. You see, they're trying to make Greenland one of the United States, and it's nowhere near the United States territory. So the United States has a habit of making states out of nations that are far off, just like they did Hawaii. So it's nothing strange for the United States to have made Israel one of its states. They just don't declare it. You know, they act more like Israel is one of their states than they do Puerto Rico. You understand what I'm saying? Most people don't even know that Puerto Rico is one of the United States. Anyway, back to the point. You know, in 1967, Israel captured the territory from Egypt in the Six-Day War. Although Israel unilaterally disengaged from Gaza in 2005, withdrawing all its settlers and military forces, the United Nations and most of the international community still consider Gaza to be under the Israeli occupation. Due to Israel's continued control over the airspace, maritime boundaries, land crossings, and everything else where traffic and commerce can move. So Gaza's been under Israeli domination since 1967, but they're terrorists because they attack Israel, but nevertheless, they not only bombing Hamas and shooting and killing Hamas and doing all these other things to Hamas, whoever that is, which I think they are some organization created by the CIA. Nevertheless, they killing up all of the so-called innocent people in Palestine and Gaza, but Hamas is the one that supposedly did the terrorist attack. So what are they saying? That the whole people are terrorists and the whole people need to be removed? That's what they're trying to tell you. And they thought that the people would just leave expeditiously after they tore up and bombed up and destroyed all the buildings. But now they see that those people want to come back to that land. And they don't understand it. So now the U.S. needs to step in to try to move all of the people out of there so they can take over the land, which was their intention in the first place. So they can build condominiums and resorts and casinos and everything else they want to be another mega Las Vegas, you might say. It's impossible how diabolical the United States is and their allies, especially against Muslim people. You know, Putin may not be a Muslim. Putin let them know that he knows that Jesus is not who the United States and the rest of the ones in the West say that Jesus is. I believe Putin knows exactly what I know. There's a lot of people becoming aware of this, and that false doctrine ain't flying no more. But nevertheless, you get a lot of people that won't even listen to my podcast because they're in denial and they've been brainwashed with all of this foolishness talking about Jesus died for your sins. Anyway, let me get back to the point. Watch this.
The Ukraine and Russia disaster would never have happened if I were president. Over the past 16 months, Israel has endured a sustained, aggressive, and murderous assault on every front. But they fought back bravely. You see that, you know that. What we have witnessed is an all-out attack on the very existence of a Jewish state in the Jewish homeland. The Israelis have stood strong and united in the face of an enemy that has kidnapped, tortured, raped, and slaughtered innocent men, women, children, and even little babies.
15th of May, 1967. A parade of military might to celebrate 19 years since the founding of the State of Israel. But this public display of power took place under a dark shadow. The previous day, Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser had ordered his forces to take up positions along the borders with Israel. 3 weeks later, on the 5th of June 1967, Israel launched an all-out war against its Arab neighbors. After only 6 days of fighting, it achieved total victory, defeating the armies of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. Known to Israelis as the Six-Day War, Israel's territorial gains would change the map of the Middle East. To this day, Israeli occupation of these lands is the main bar to peace in this turbulent region.
These huge territories which the Israeli army had conquered, it completely intoxicated. Everybody was intoxicated. No one could even think straight.
But the story of this war is much longer than the 6 days of fighting. Its roots lay years earlier, 2 decades before the 5th of June, 1967. Tel Aviv, the 14th of May, 1948. The day that Zionist leader David Ben-Gurion declared the establishment of the State of Israel. On the day after the declaration, 5 Arab armies entered Palestine. The Lebanese attacked from the north, the Syrians, Iraqis, and Jordanians from the east. But the most serious threat came from the south.
The Egyptian army advanced to the village of Yibna, which is 22 kilometers from Tel Aviv.
All right, hold up. Did y'all see that? Did you see what the Egyptian army looked like? Okay, in the biblical days, as is written in the Bible, the Israelites, a couple of Israelites were mistaken for Egyptians. So they had to look like Egyptians in those days in order for them to be mistaken for Egyptians. Now, you tell me, no, you tell yourself what color the Egyptians was. Watch this.
Army advanced to the village of Yibna, which is 22 kilometers from Tel Aviv.
I just wanted y'all to get some additional confirmation about who Israel, the children of Israel, who they look like. They look like the Egyptians. The ones that you just saw are what the true Israelites look like. In case you didn't know, Judah is the tribe of the Jews. Judah is one of the children of Israel. All of the children of Israel were so-called black. So these ones that the Bible referred to as the Synagogue of Satan are them Caucasian ones that went to war against the people that looked melanin dominant that surrounded them. That's why they attacked them unprovoked. I'm just trying to show you what the Synagogue of Satan, how they operate. They operate just like you see. They lie. They say they are somebody that they're not. They murder people unprovoked, by surprise, but nevertheless, they want to call somebody else a terrorist. And you wonder why most of your so-called preachers, which I call your false prophets, they don't tell you this stuff because they work for the Synagogue of Satan. So that means that they are of the Synagogue of Satan. They work for the so-called Jew because they got a 501c3, so they can't tell you the truth. They got to give you that Christianity bullshit.
And it's going to happen, I think, very quickly. I also strongly believe that the Gaza Strip, which has been a symbol of death and destruction for so many decades and so bad for the people anywhere near it, and especially those who live there, and frankly, who's been really very unlucky. It's been very unlucky. It's been an unlucky place for a long time. Being in its presence just has not been good, and it should not go through a process of rebuilding and occupation by the same people that have really stood there and fought for it and lived there and died there and lived a miserable existence there. Instead, we should go to other countries of interest with humanitarian hearts, and there are many of them that want to do this, and build various domains that will ultimately be occupied by the 1.8 million Palestinians living in Gaza, ending the death and destruction and, frankly, bad luck. This can be paid for by neighboring countries of great wealth. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 12. It could be numerous sites, or it could be one large site. but the people will be able to live in comfort and peace, and we'll make sure something really spectacular is done. They're going to have peace. They're not going to be shot at and killed and destroyed like this civilization of wonderful people has had to endure. The only reason the Palestinians want to go back to Gaza is they have no alternative. It's right now a demolition site. This is just a demolition site. Virtually every building is down. They're living under fallen concrete that's very dangerous and very precarious. They instead can occupy all of a beautiful area with homes and safety, and they can live out their lives in peace and harmony instead of having to go back and do it again. The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years. I'm hopeful that this ceasefire could be the beginning of a larger and more enduring peace that will end the bloodshed and killing once and for all. With the same goal in mind, my administration has been moving quickly to restore trust in the alliance and rebuild American strength throughout the region. And we've really done that. We're a respected nation again. A lot's happened in the last couple of weeks. We are actually a very respected nation again. I ended the last administration's de facto arms embargo on over $1 billion in military assistance for Israel. And I'm also pleased to announce that this afternoon, the United States withdrew from the anti-Semitic UN Human Rights Council and ended all of the support for the UN Relief and Works Agency, which funneled money to Hamas and which was very disloyal to humanity. Today, I also took action to restore a maximum pressure policy on the Iranian regime, and we will once again enforce the most aggressive possible sanctions, drive Iranian oil exports to zero, and diminish the regime's capacity to fund terror throughout the region and throughout the world. We had no threat when I left office. Iran was not able to sell oil. Nobody was buying oil because I said, don't buy it. If you buy it, you're not doing any business with the United States. And Hamas was not being funded. Hezbollah was not being funded. Nobody was being funded. There would never have been an October 7th. 2 weeks ago, I once again designated the Houthis as a terrorist organization. They're trying to destroy world shipping lanes, and that's not going to happen. And over the weekend, I ordered airstrikes against senior ISIS leaders hiding in the caves of Somalia and took them out. Here in America, we've begun the process of deporting foreign terrorists, jihadists, and Hamas sympathizers from our soil, just as we have people that are extremely evil, and we're sending them out of our country. They came from jails, they came from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they were dumped into our country. They're gang members. We're getting them out at numbers that nobody can actually believe. And every single country is taking those people back. They said they would never take them back, and they're all taking them back, and they're taking them back very gladly. And I recently signed an executive order combating the vile wave of anti-Semitism that we've seen in the aftermath of the October 7th attacks. Together, America and Israel will renew the optimism that shined so brightly just 4 years ago. It was really a bright, beautiful light. We will restore calm and stability to the region and expand prosperity, opportunity, and hope to our nations and for all people of the Middle East, including the Arab and Muslim nations. Very important. We want the Arab and Muslim nations to have peace and have tranquility and have great lives. I'd like to now invite Prime Minister Netanyahu to say a few words, and we'll take some questions afterwards. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I watched that speech. So when you watch that, you have to be able to see how the A National OCGFC are operating and why Trump is their man. I mean, I've been telling you for 3 years, going on 3 years, that there's a destabilization campaign against Europe, that's what the Ukraine war actually is. It's a proxy war being waged by the United States, not against Russia, but against Europe. I've been telling you that they're turning on each other. The West is turning on itself. I've been telling you that America is going to become more and more interested in creating conflict in the West, not in the global South. I've been telling you that the historical roles of the global North and the global South are going to be reversed. Didn't I tell you that? Well, look at the last Trump press conference. He's talking about destroying Canada economically. He's talking about trying to force them into submission. That's what all this talk is really about. He's talking about making the whole country into an American state. And he's talking about doing the same thing with Greenland. Except with Greenland, he even said that they might use military force to do it. So that's a direct threat against the EU, and they've taken it as such. He's literally saying that America could potentially use military force against a European country in order to seize territory from them. Seize European territory. Well, that's nothing but colonization. What he's talking about with regards to Canada, that's nothing but colonization. The man is talking about occupying, colonizing, and pillaging other Western countries, the resources of other Western countries. He called the border between Canada and the U.S. an artificially drawn line. I mean, Putin didn't even say that about Ukraine. Meanwhile, the border with Mexico, that isn't artificial at all. It's just an artificial border between Canada and America. Greenland and Canada get to become American states. Meanwhile, Puerto Rico is called a floating island of garbage at a Trump campaign rally over the summer. So Puerto Rico is trash, and the Mexican border needs a wall, but the border with Canada is just an imaginary line. It doesn't really exist. Now, the obvious racism is just that. It's obvious. But if you think about it a little bit more deeply, there's a reason for drawing a demarcation line like this, what Trump is trying to do. The U.S. empire is looking at subjugating the northern hemisphere, and the southern hemisphere is no longer any of their business. It's out of their sphere of influence. In fact, the southern hemisphere is the ascendant hemisphere. I mean, did you notice how his press conference, how it began? What he did what the real reason for the press conference was? He was talking about the UAE pumping in $20 billion of investment into the United States. I mean, imagine. We're already at this point. We're already at the point where an American president is bragging about successfully attracting foreign direct investment from the global South into America. I mean, this is usually the kind of thing that a president in the global South would be bragging about, you know, being able to attract foreign investment. But now you have the president of the United States, or the president-elect of the United States, being proud and bragging about the UAE opening up data centers in his country. Role reversal. It's actually really interesting to me. It's interesting to watch all of this play out, alhamdulillah, in our lifetime. We're seeing a major change. Basically, the neocons, the nationalistic OCGFC, are being placated. This is what Trump is doing. They're being redirected to feed their cannibalistic appetites on other Anglo-Saxons. I mean, this was the West's primary activity for centuries. Before they ever invaded our lands, they just cannibalized each other. That was the main pastime. So we're coming full circle. I mean, of course, the neocons need to maintain a fantasy of power. And I think that that's partly what's going on with Trump's outlandish suggestion. It's giving them something to dream about while they create nightmares for everyone else. I mean, the suggestion that the United States could just take Canada, take Greenland, it may sound absurd, but it actually reveals something far deeper than just the mere posturing of a braggart. This is in the imperial DNA of the Western power structure, system that has absolutely thrived on the subjugation of others' lands, others' resources, and other people for centuries. It isn't just about geography. This is about desperation on the part of the West, on the part of America. It's about a crumbling empire that's grasping at fantasies to try to reclaim relevance as its power slips away. To entertain the idea of annexing Canada or annexing Greenland or both in the 21st century is clinging to a mindset that belongs in the colonial past. It's obviously geopolitically absurd to try to do something like this today with all of the alliances and the sovereignties that are at play. But the point isn't whether this is feasible or not. It's that the very notion itself reflects an empire that is incapable of adapting to a world that is no longer defined by its dominance. The United States is not asserting strength here, it's telegraphing fear. This isn't a serious proposal. It's a tantrum dressed up as a strategy. It's the instinct of a predator whose fangs have fallen out, and they're lashing out in vain as his prey slips through its fingers. In my opinion, Trump is giving the neocons a fantasy of America. A fantasy of America as a great, giant imperial landmass like China or the former Soviet Union. A landmass of majority white people. That's important. Because as so-called minorities, or rather as members of the global majority who happen to live in America, as they are increasingly becoming the collective majority of that country, in other words, as white people are gradually becoming the largest minority in America, well, racists in America have a demographic problem, similar to the Zionists. But unlike the Zionists, if America starts annexing territory in the Northern Hemisphere, well, that's territory that has its own kind in it. They have their own kind there. Now, if the Zionists seize territory, well, it's not filled with Jews. In fact, they don't even have enough Jews in the world. There's not even enough Jews on earth to fill the territory that they want, or even the territory that they already have. But if America takes Canada, if America takes Greenland, well, then the white population of the new United States empire would be at least increased by a few percentage points, which matters to them. Maybe more if Canada adopts a mass deportation policy like America. See, it's almost like they're trying to gather all their own kind together and either expel or refuse entry to the so-called racial and so-called ethnic demographic groups of the global majority who they never liked. And that's actually something that the global majority should be happy about, to be honest. The global majority should be happy about that. You should be happy about the anti-immigration policies, frankly, because they're literally trying to keep you off of a sinking ship, while they're telling everyone else who's stuck on board that ship that it was the weight that was making them sink, not the gaping hole in the side of the vessel. In other words, they're lying to their own people about what's really happening about and why their ship is going down. But they're trying to keep you from jumping from the iceberg onto the Titanic, which is exactly what it is when anyone immigrates from the global south into America or into the West. You're just jumping from the iceberg to the Titanic. And they're trying to keep you off of it with their anti-immigration policies. Now, of course, this new Trumpian manifest destiny is nothing but a daydream. It doesn't really mean anything in reality. Trump is selling hallucinogens to the neocons. And of course, he's also just providing a distraction to the American people. This is one of the main things that politicians do in America. He's providing them a distraction that will appeal to their nationalistic ego and their nationalistic vanity. Anytime America talks about anything outside of America, all they're trying to do is distract their citizens from what's happening in their country, from the inequalities, from the economic collapse, from the erosion of their rights. All of this is happening in their own neighborhoods, so let's look somewhere else. Let's try to make them look somewhere else. It's for the American people to try to keep them looking outwards while their own houses burn down. And I mean that literally. I mean, I don't think you could find, or I don't think you could imagine or come up with a better metaphor for America today than what's happening in California right now. You've got tens of billions of dollars worth of damage from those fires in California. Meanwhile, there's no water. The fire extinguishers aren't producing any water. Their firefighting equipment is all gone to Ukraine. Whole neighborhoods in Los Angeles, subhanAllah, whole neighborhoods in Los Angeles look like Gaza today. How about that? And you have a mayor who doesn't even know that a URL, or that the term URL isn't the same thing as a website. This is America. So yes, you pretend that you're going to transform into some huge, expansive geographic empire. From the Arctic all the way down to the renamed Gulf of America, just to divert from the reality of your reduction as a world empire. You talk big even though you can't even fill your own boots anymore. And that's why you talk big, because you're shrinking. Now, no, that doesn't mean that it's all empty talk. It's not completely empty. As I say, the A-National OCGFC have a plan. Is what I've been talking about for 3 years. Relations are going to become increasingly hostile between the U.S. and Canada, between the U.S. and Europe, between the U.S. and the rest of the Northern Hemisphere. Everyone is being misled, in my opinion, with regards to thinking that Trump wants to have problems with China, that he's trying to make problems with China, or that he's confrontation with China. I don't think that's accurate at all. they're going to be making problems for the West. America's going to be making problems for the West, which essentially just delivers the global South to China and to BRICS. MAGA isn't about helping the American people any more than a corporate restructuring is about helping the workers. That's how you can probably conceptualize what's happening in America. America is downsizing. All while, you know, just like with a company, when they downsize, they're telling everyone that they're just consolidating and they're just streamlining, and that everything they're doing is just going to make everything better than it ever was. They're going to make the company stronger than it ever was, and so on. Meanwhile, the richest of the rich in America are perched with their golden parachutes that will float them off into the global South, while your cities crash and burn. This is the death rattle of a system in crisis. Western colonial capitalism, in its current form, is unsustainable, and that's obvious. The U.S. economy has been hollowed out by financialization, by deindustrialization, and it can no longer stand on its own. That's a fact. The system runs on blood. The system runs on turmoil. Canada and Greenland and Europe have had a good run in terms of being able to orbit the United States without ever having gotten sucked into the vortex of that vampiric system. But that good run is over, and they're going to get sucked in. The same system that they used to pillage the global South is turning its sights around. You know, you've heard about those prisons where the inmates rebel and take over the facility. Well, it's kind of like that, I think. The world today is kind of like that. All of your former prisoners, the colonized countries, the so-called developing countries, your former prisoners, have taken over the jail. And now the rifleman in the gun tower is turning his rifle around, because he can see which way the wind is blowing. He can see who's actually in charge now. So now you've got prison guards who are stripping off their uniforms to try to put on the prison blues, because your uniform just makes you a target. I'm talking about the West now. Oh, the tables are turning. I mean, look at this UAE investment that no one seems to want to talk about. I mean, think about that. The UAE investment was literally the only actual substantive thing, the only actual thing of substance that Donald Trump even talked about at that press conference the other day, and no one's even talking about it. No one is even mentioning that that's actually the reason for the thing. Everyone's talking about Canada, everyone's talking about Greenland, Panama Canal, and so forth. No one even noticed the fact that Mr. America First is bragging about $20 billion in foreign direct investment that's going to go to operate exactly the same way in America that Western investment always operated in our countries. That's exactly what they're doing. I mean, literally. The UAE is doing the exact same thing that the West has always done to us, but no one can see it and no one's talking about it. You have to understand that the way foreign investment works is like a syringe. They tell you that it's injecting you with medicine, but what they actually do is stick that needle in you to suck your blood. So you think that they're injecting, but they're actually extracting. Because look, this deal that he announced, they're going to open data centers in the U.S., okay? Well, aside from how much power and leverage that gives the UAE potentially over American data, which is massive, but let's not even talk about that. There's too many things to say really about that. That's not really even my area. But just consider the fact that data centers notoriously consume a huge amount of energy, a huge amount of electricity. This is why Trump was rambling for most of his press conference. He was rambling on and on and on about drilling, drill baby drill, about coal, and he was even attacking windmills and all sorts of things, which is just too obviously quixotic to even mention. Okay, they use a massive amount of energy, these data centers. They use a massive amount of energy, a massive amount of electricity. That's going to be American energy. That's going to be American electricity, powered either by natural gas, by oil, or by coal, or what have you. Apparently not by windmills. So let's just say that they open 10 data centers. The amount of energy that they will consume to run those data centers is going to be roughly equivalent to the total of U.S. natural gas exports. Imagine. This investment is only partially about the actual data centers themselves. This investment is about sapping America's energy resources. It's an investment into sabotaging America's newfound status as an energy exporter. And that's if they just open 10. If they just open 10 data centers, but they're putting in $20 billion investment in. For $20 billion, you could open hundreds of data centers, or 10 data centers with the capacity of hundreds. Either way, that's $20 billion that can potentially significantly undermine America's energy self-sufficiency. And more importantly, for the Khalij, for the Gulf, undermine America's competitiveness in the international markets as an energy exporter. This is a very important issue for the UAE. It's a very important issue for the Gulf. Trump knows this, of course, because the A-National OCGFC knows this. Trump is very close to the Gulf states and always has been. I mean, you can almost say, and this is what I've been saying in the chat, Trump is a Khaliji president. I mean, he's so Khaliji that he wants to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America just so America can have a Khalij. What we're witnessing is the West turning on itself. The empire is cannibalizing its allies. They're cannibalizing their own environments now, and they're cannibalizing their own people just to stay alive. This isn't strength, this is desperation. This is a dying system that's clawing at anything to try to keep from falling. I'm talking about the neocons, not the A-National OCGFC. I'm talking about the nationalistic owners and controllers of capital. But the stronger and the richer faction of the OCGFC, the A-National OCGFC, whom your own system created, that faction of elites are not tied to your domestic prosperity. They're not tied to your domestic economy anymore. And they're not tied to any nation. They are a nation unto themselves, like I keep saying. And they actively want to see your system devour itself because they want to leave the rest of the world to them. They want America out of it. So what does that mean for us, for Muslims, and for the global South? Well, it means that we have to prepare. We have to be serious. We have to build. Because as the empire collapses, we have an opportunity to create something that we haven't seen in the world for hundreds of years. This isn't a call to resist, it's a call to lead, to show the world that there is a different way. There is a just way. There's a way that's rooted in harmony and cohesion and collective sovereignty. And I think that's what we're seeing develop. So let's not be distracted by the empire's desperate fantasies. We have to focus on the work ahead. We have to understand what's actually happening because there are tremendous risks. I mean, BRICS is working with the A-National OCGFC, and that's perilous in and of itself. They are predatory. They're just the same as neocons in terms of being predators. They want to worm their way into dominance in the global South. So we have to negotiate that relationship very carefully. This is going to require cool heads, calm calculation, patience, and long-term planning. So you have to try to not get caught up in the flash bombs that they drop sporadically, Western politicians. You need to pay close attention to what's actually going on. Because yes, we are in a negotiation, all of us, literally all of us. We're all in a negotiation with power, continuously, constantly, nonstop. You and I are constantly defining the terms of our relationship with power. We are constantly letting them know what they can and cannot get away with. We're letting them know what we require from them. We're letting them know continuously what we will and will not accept. So we really can't afford to let them distract us. The West is turning on itself. So we have to ensure that we are ready to rise when the West falls.
The preceding has been a video podcast presentation of the Audacity of Truth Podcast show hosted by Malik Israel. This is a multi-part episode. You should follow and subscribe to ensure you don't miss any future podcasts from the Audacity of Truth Podcast show exclusively on Spotify and YouTube.